New York City. A glass tower of power. Inside, a billionaire CEO humiliates a janitor, Gloria Stein, forcing her to crawl while his boardroom laughs and records. They thought she was powerless. They thought she would stay silent. They were wrong. A hidden USB, a missing intern, a failed assassination, and a witness who returns from the dead. The empire of Titancore begins to crack. Billions lost. Protests in the streets. And FBI agents are closing in. This isn't just revenge. This is rebellion. The story of one invisible woman who brought a corporate giant to its knees. If this moment felt intense, prepare yourself, because what comes next is darker, more dangerous, and far more powerful than anything you've seen so far. The city of New York never sleeps. Its towers scrape the skies, its streets echo with ambition, and its people live in the shadow of power. Among them was Gloria Stein, a woman most people would never notice. She wasn't an executive or a politician. She wasn't rich or influential. She was a janitor, a quiet presence in the hallways of Titancore Industries, one of America's most powerful defense corporations. Every night, when the skyscraper emptied of its busy executives, Gloria began her shift. Her hands, rough from years of work, gripped the mop with the kind of care an artist holds a brush. Where others saw dirt, Gloria saw purpose. Each polished tile, each spotless window, was her quiet victory against a world that often ignored her. Gloria's routine was always the same: clean the executive floor, tidy the boardroom, and make sure the space was pristine before morning. The executives who walked these halls rarely acknowledged her existence. To them, she was invisible, just part of the building, like the walls or the floor. Yet Gloria carried herself with dignity. When she worked, she hummed the same gospel tunes her late mother used to sing in church. The melodies gave her strength, a reminder that no matter how invisible she seemed, she still mattered. But beneath Gloria's calm surface lived a lifetime of scars. She had seen hardship, endured losses, and carried memories she rarely spoke about. Life had not been kind, but it had made her resilient. She believed that dignity was not in titles or wealth, but in how one chose to live, even in the darkest corners of society. On this particular Friday night, something felt different. The top floor of Titancore was unusually loud. From the closed boardroom doors came bursts of laughter, the clink of champagne glasses, and voices thick with arrogance. Gloria paused in the hallway, her mop bucket resting beside her. She was used to executives working late, but this sounded more like a celebration, or perhaps a secret revelry. She tried to ignore it, focusing instead on her work. But the laughter carried on, growing sharper, crueler. Her chest tightened with unease. As she polished the glass wall outside the boardroom, she caught her reflection. Behind her, through the frosted glass, shadows moved. Expensive suits, careless gestures, the silhouettes of men who controlled billions. Gloria whispered to herself, "Just keep working. Just finish the shift." Yet, in her heart, she knew that tonight her quiet, invisible world was about to collide with theirs. And when it did, nothing in her life, or in theirs, would ever be the same again. For now, though, she was just the silent janitor. The woman no one saw. The woman no one respected. The woman whose story had not yet begun. But deep inside Gloria Stein, a storm was waiting. And when it finally broke free, it would shake the very foundations of Titancore's empire. The echoes of laughter from the Titancore boardroom lingered in Gloria's mind long after her shift ended. She returned the next evening, determined to ignore the memories of the humiliation that had shaken her dignity. Yet something inside her had changed. She was no longer simply polishing floors. She was polishing the very stage where her pain had been mocked. As she entered the executive floor, the silence felt heavier than usual. Gone were the echoes of celebration. In their place, a strange tension hung in the air. Gloria's steps slowed as she approached the boardroom. The doors were closed, but faint traces of cigar smoke and spilt champagne lingered. She shook her head, forcing herself to focus on her tasks. But then it happened. A quiet voice from behind startled her. "Gloria," whispered a young man. She turned sharply. Standing in the shadows was Ethan Ross, a timid intern she had seen occasionally but never spoken to. His face was pale, his eyes darting nervously down the hall as if someone might be watching. "Don't have much time," Ethan stammered. He pulled something from his pocket, a small flash drive, and pressed it into her trembling hand. "You don't know me, but you need to take this. Don't show anyone." "Not yet." Gloria looked at the drive, confusion clouding her thoughts. "What is this?" she whispered. "Proof," Ethan said, his voice barely audible. "Proof of everything. What they did to you, and what they've been hiding from the world." Before she could ask more, he slipped away, vanishing down the stairwell like a ghost. Gloria stood frozen, the tiny device burning in her palm. For the first time in years, fear and curiosity battled within her. Later that night, in the dim light of her modest apartment, Gloria sat at her old laptop and hesitated. Her heart pounded as she slid the flash drive into the USB port. The screen flickered, and a series of folders appeared. The first file she opened made her gasp. It was the video, her humiliation in the boardroom recorded from multiple angles. Her chest tightened, her face flushed with the sting of memory. But there was more, much more. She clicked another folder. Documents spilt across the screen, secret contracts with foreign governments, illegal arms deals, hidden bank accounts in offshore havens. Names of politicians, CEOs, and even military officers were listed, men who had been bribed, paid, and silenced. The deeper she scrolled, the darker it became. Human lives were reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet, entire conflicts fueled by Titan Corps' greed. The scale of corruption was staggering. Gloria leaned back, her hands shaking. It wasn't just about her anymore. She had stumbled onto something far bigger, something dangerous. She realized now why Ethan had looked so afraid. For years she had been invisible. To the world she was only a janitor. But tonight she held in her hands the kind of truth that could bring down giants. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she whispered into the quiet of her room. "They thought they could break me. They thought I was nothing, but now I hold their empire in my hands." And with that, Gloria Stein's war had truly begun. The following morning, Gloria arrived at Titan Corps with the flash drive tucked safely inside her bag. Her mind was a storm of questions. Should she go to the police? Should she expose the files to the press? Or should she confront the company directly? The weight of her discovery pressed heavily on her chest. By noon, whispers began to circle the office. People glanced at her more than usual, their eyes lingering with something sharper than curiosity. Gloria brushed it off, but unease gnawed at her. Someone knew. That evening, as she was finishing her shift, she received a message on her work phone. "Report to HR, now." Her pulse quickened. She walked down the long corridor, her footsteps echoing against the polished marble floor. At the end sat the office of Karen Whitmore, Titan Corps' head of human resources. Karen was known for her icy demeanor and the power she held over employees' futures. Gloria stepped inside. The blinds were drawn, the room dimly lit. Karen sat behind her desk, her posture perfectly straight, her manicured fingers tapping against a thick file. Without looking up, she said, "Close the door." Gloria obeyed, her throat tightening. Finally, Karen raised her eyes, piercing and cold. "Do you know why you're here?" Gloria swallowed. "No, ma'am." Karen leaned forward, her smile thin and sharp. "You've been poking around where you don't belong." She slid a photo across the desk. Gloria's breath caught. It was an image of her, taken just last night, sitting at her apartment desk with her laptop open. Someone had been watching her. Karen's voice dropped lower, silk wrapped around steel. "You think you're clever, Gloria? Filing complaints. Talking about abuse. But let me explain something. Men like Edward Marston don't fall. Titan Corps doesn't fall. People who try to make it fall disappear." The words cut deeper than any knife. Karen continued, "You've worked here long enough to know the rules. You're invisible. You clean floors. That's all. But if you step out of line again, you won't just lose your job. You'll lose much more." She paused, letting the threat hang heavy in the air. "We know where you live. We know who your neighbors are. Even the church you go to." Gloria's hands trembled in her lap, but she forced her voice to remain steady. "Are you threatening me?" Karen chuckled softly. I don't make threats. I give warnings. Drop this foolishness, destroy whatever you have, and life will go on as it always has. Otherwise, she leaned back, eyes narrowing. Don't say I didn't warn you. Gloria left the office shaken, her legs unsteady. The hallway seemed darker than before, each shadow carrying menace. By the time she reached the janitor's locker room, her fear turned to fury. She opened her locker and froze. Inside, her belongings had been trashed. Her mother's rosary beads, the one keepsake she cherished most, were snapped in half. Her uniform was shredded, smeared with black ink. Tears filled her eyes, but she wiped them away. If Titan Core thought intimidation would silence her, they were wrong. For years, she had been invisible. But now they had seen her, and that was their mistake. The night after Karen's threat, Gloria could barely sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow outside her window made her pulse quicken. But beneath the fear, a fire had started to burn, a fire that refused to die. She sat at her small kitchen table, staring at Ethan's flash drive. The files inside weren't just documents. They were weapons. Weapons of truth, and she knew weapons were only powerful when used. By dawn, her decision was made. She wouldn't stay silent. Not anymore. Gloria reached out to an old acquaintance, Detective Marcus Hale, a retired police officer she used to see at her church. He had a reputation for being honest, the kind of man who had lost his badge because he wouldn't bow to corruption. If anyone could guide her, it was him. When they met at a quiet diner on the edge of town, Marcus looked older, tired, but his eyes sharpened the moment Gloria slid the flash drive across the table. "Open it," she whispered. He hesitated, then plugged it into his battered laptop. As the files appeared, Marcus's jaw tightened. He scrolled through evidence of secret arms shipments, bribes to politicians, and even reports of disappeared whistleblowers. "This," he muttered, his voice heavy, "this is bigger than you realize. Gloria Titan Core has friends everywhere. Government, military, law enforcement. If you go public without protection, they'll bury you before the truth sees daylight." Gloria leaned forward, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "Then help me. If we don't fight back, they'll keep destroying lives. They'll keep thinking people like me don't matter." Marcus studied her for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "All right, but once this storm breaks, there's no turning back." That evening, Gloria returned to Titan Core for her shift. The building felt different, colder, hostile. As she mopped the marble floor, she noticed men in black suits patrolling where they had never been before. Their eyes followed her like hawks. She tried to stay calm, but her instincts screamed danger. When she reached the boardroom, her breath caught. The large screen on the wall flickered to life, displaying a grainy live feed of her apartment. Someone was inside, rummaging through her belongings. Gloria's mop slipped from her hands. Her chest tightened. They weren't just threatening anymore, they were invading her life. Suddenly, the screen changed. A video played, Ethan Ross, the young intern, tied to a chair, bruised and bloodied. His eyes were wide with fear. A man's voice echoed over the speakers, deep and cruel. "Gloria Stein, we know what you took. You have one chance to return it. Or the boy pays the price." The video cut to black. Gloria staggered back, her breath shallow. Her worst fear had come true. Ethan had been caught because of her. For a moment, despair threatened to break her. But then, she clenched her fists, her eyes burning with resolve. Titan Core thought fear would silence her, but fear had transformed into fury, and fury into courage. "They want a storm," she whispered. "Then I'll give them one." And for the first time, Gloria no longer felt invisible. She felt unstoppable. The image of Ethan tied to a chair haunted Gloria's mind as she walked out of Titan Core that night. Fear pressed down on her like a heavy weight, but beneath it, something unshakable rose. Determination. They had crossed the final line. Now it wasn't just about justice. It was about survival. Detective Marcus Hale met her in the quiet corner of a church basement, away from cameras and prying eyes. His face was grim, his hands folded over the flash drive. "They're desperate," Marcus said. "If they've kidnapped Ethan, it means this evidence could destroy them." Gloria, we must hit them hard, fast, before they erase everything. Gloria nodded, her voice steady. Then let's bring their empire down. For days, Marcus and Gloria worked in secrecy. Marcus contacted old allies, retired officers, journalists who had been silenced, and even a cyber expert who had once exposed government fraud. Piece by piece, they built a network of truth-tellers who were ready to risk everything. Gloria wasn't just the janitor anymore. She became the movement's heart. Each night she gathered workers who had been mistreated by Titan Core, engineers, clerks, even security guards who had lost hope. For the first time, they looked at her not as someone invisible, but as a leader. Word spread quietly. Social media posts appeared with cryptic hashtags, "Invisible no more" and "Justice for Ethan." At first, they seemed like whispers in the storm, but soon they roared across the internet. The pressure mounted. News outlets picked up rumors of corruption at Titan Core. Protesters began gathering outside the glass towers of the corporation, chanting Gloria's name. Inside the boardroom, Richard Sterling's empire trembled. The once arrogant CEO slammed his fist against the polished mahogany table as executives whispered about investigations and falling stock prices. "Find her!" Sterling roared. "Find Stein before she destroys us all!" But it was already too late. Marcus and Gloria timed their strike carefully. During Titan Core's annual shareholder meeting, streamed live to millions of investors, Gloria and her allies hacked into the broadcast. Instead of Sterling's rehearsed speech, the screens flickered, and then the truth spilt out. The video of Gloria's humiliation. The documents of bribes and arms deals. The evidence of whistleblowers silenced. And finally, Ethan's battered face, a living testimony of the corporation's cruelty. The crowd gasped. Shareholders shouted in outrage. Phones lit up with breaking news alerts. Federal agents, who had been tipped off by Marcus's contacts, stormed the building within minutes. Richard Sterling's arrogance melted into panic. As agents placed him in handcuffs, cameras captured his downfall for the world to see. That night, Gloria stood among the protesters outside Titan Core. The air was electric with chants of victory. Strangers embraced her, workers held her hands, and Ethan, rescued by authorities during the raid, stood beside her, bruised but alive. For Gloria, it wasn't triumph she felt, but release. The weight of invisibility had lifted. She had faced the giants and forced them to fall. Marcus turned to her with a tired smile. "Gloria Stein, you just brought down an empire." She looked at the sea of people holding signs, chanting for justice, and whispered, "No." "We all did." The night Richard Sterling was arrested felt like the closing of a dark chapter. Crowds filled the streets outside Titan Core's headquarters, chanting Gloria's name, waving banners, and singing songs of victory. For the first time in her life, Gloria Stein stood in the light, no longer invisible. Yet deep inside, she knew the fight wasn't truly over. Empires fall, but systems of greed and cruelty rarely disappear overnight. In the weeks that followed, Gloria returned to her modest apartment. The cameras and reporters wanted her story, but she avoided the spotlight as much as she could. What mattered to her wasn't fame, it was the people. Workers, janitors, engineers, interns, ordinary people like Ethan who had been silenced for too long. One evening, Ethan came to visit her. His injuries were healing, though his eyes carried the shadows of what he had endured. "You saved my life," he said quietly. Gloria shook her head. "No, Ethan, you saved mine. If you hadn't trusted me with that drive, I'd still be scrubbing floors in silence." They sat together for a long time, the weight of their shared scars binding them in unspoken solidarity. Meanwhile, Detective Marcus Hale worked with federal agents to track Titan Core's allies. One arrest turned into dozens. Politicians, executives, and shadowy middlemen were dragged into the light. But with every victory came a reminder. There were still more like Sterling out there, waiting in the shadows. Gloria began organizing community meetings in church halls, union centers, and small cafes. She spoke not as a hero but as a worker who had endured. People listened because she understood their struggles. She wasn't a politician and she wasn't rich. She was one of them. Her words ignited something far greater than revenge, hope. Soon, a movement was born. Workers across the country began sharing their own stories online, using the hashtag #InvisibleNoMore. Protests spread from city to city. Corporations that once acted untouchable suddenly faced angry crowds demanding fair wages, safe workplaces, and accountability. Gloria watched in awe as something bigger than herself unfolded. She had lit a match, but the people had turned it into a wildfire. Still, the threats didn't vanish. Anonymous messages warned her to stop. Unmarked cars sometimes lingered outside her apartment. But Gloria refused to be silenced. "This isn't the end," she told Marcus one night. "It's the beginning of a new battle. Not just against one man, but against a system that treats people as disposable." Marcus smiled wearily. "Then it's a battle worth fighting." Months later, Gloria stood at a massive rally in Washington, D.C. Tens of thousands filled the streets. Flags waved, drums beat, and chants echoed. She stepped onto the stage, her hands trembling. Not from fear, but from the power of the moment. Looking out at the sea of faces, workers, mothers, fathers, students, she felt tears blur her vision. "They called me invisible," she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "But I am not invisible. None of us is. Together we are louder than any empire, stronger than any tyrant, and braver than any fear. This fight is ours, and we will not stop until justice belongs to everyone." The crowd erupted in thunderous applause. For Gloria Stein, the humiliation in that boardroom was no longer a wound. It was the spark that gave birth to a movement. A new battle had begun, and this time she wasn't fighting alone. The image of Richard Sterling in handcuffs spread like wildfire across every news network in America. For years, Titan Corp's CEO had been untouchable, a symbol of ruthless power and wealth. Now he stood pale and broken, led away by federal agents as flashing cameras captured every step. To the world, his arrest was the end of a story. But for Gloria Stein, it was only the beginning of another chapter. In the days following Sterling's downfall, the atmosphere around Titan Corp shifted dramatically. The once imposing glass tower felt hollow, its marble floors echoing with uncertainty. Executives who had once sneered at Gloria now avoided eye contact, whispering nervously in the hallways. Many were summoned by investigators and escorted from the building under the watchful eyes of agents. The shareholders, furious over the collapse in stock value, filed lawsuits. Federal prosecutors froze Titan Corp's accounts. The empire that Sterling had built through fear and corruption was crumbling piece by piece. Gloria returned to her nightly shift, but the work felt different now. She was no longer invisible. Security guards greeted her with respect. Workers whispered her name like it was a symbol of courage. For the first time in her life, her presence carried weight. Still, her heart remained heavy. Ethan was recovering, but the trauma lingered. She often visited him, bringing meals and reading the scriptures his late mother had once cherished. His smile was faint, but gratitude shone in his eyes. "You gave me my life back," Ethan told her softly one evening. "No," Gloria replied. "You gave me a reason to fight." Meanwhile, Marcus Hale spent sleepless nights assisting federal agents. The files Ethan had smuggled out revealed layers of corruption, secret deals with defense contractors, bribed senators, and even connections to organized crime. Each revelation widened the investigation. Sterling's arrest was just the tip of the iceberg, Marcus explained during one of their meetings. "There are men more dangerous than him, men who don't want their secrets exposed. We have to stay careful." Gloria nodded, understanding the weight of his words. The threats against her hadn't disappeared. Strange cars still lingered outside her apartment. Anonymous letters slipped under her door, warning her to stop. But instead of fear, each threat only hardened her resolve. The media couldn't get enough of her story. Journalists flooded her neighborhood, eager to interview the invisible janitor who took down a giant. Gloria declined most requests, preferring to stay with her community. Still, her name became a rallying cry across the country. Workers in factories, teachers in schools, nurses in hospitals. All began sharing their own stories of exploitation, inspired by her courage. One night, Gloria stood outside Titan Core's gates, where protesters had gathered once more. She saw young people holding handmade signs. "We are not invisible. Justice for workers. Gloria Stein, our voice." The sight overwhelmed her. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness but from the realization that this movement was no longer about her. It was about everyone who had been silenced, humiliated, or discarded. As the cold wind swept across the crowd, Gloria whispered to herself, "They thought arresting Sterling was the end. But it's just the beginning of something bigger." And in that moment, she understood. Her fight was no longer against one man or one company. It was against an entire system. A new war for dignity had begun. Richard Sterling's arrest had shaken the world, but the empire he built wasn't gone. It was only wounded. Behind Titan Core stood powerful allies, corrupt politicians, defense contractors, and shadowy financiers who had profited from Sterling's rise. With their figurehead in chains, they needed someone to blame, and their eyes turned to Gloria Stein. The first signs came as whispers. Anonymous letters slid under her door. Calls in the dead of night. Men were watching from parked cars outside her apartment. Marcus Hale warned her repeatedly, "Sterling was just the front. The real power is still out there, and they don't forgive humiliation." Gloria knew he was right, but what truly worried her was Ethan. The young intern had risked everything to give her the flash drive. Though he tried to hide it, fear lingered in his eyes whenever he walked home at night. "Stay close," Gloria told him one evening. "They know you're part of this too." Ethan managed a brave smile. "I'll be fine. You taught me not to be invisible anymore." But the danger struck sooner than either of them expected. 3 nights later, Ethan vanished. He didn't show up at their scheduled meeting, and his phone went silent. Hours turned into a day, and Gloria's chest grew heavier with dread. Then came the message. Her phone buzzed with a video file. With trembling hands, she pressed play. The screen lit up with Ethan, tied to a chair in a dim warehouse, his face bruised, his shirt bloodied. His eyes, though swollen, searched the camera desperately. A masked man's voice filled the silence. "Gloria Stein, you should have stayed invisible. You have 72 hours to return the files. If you don't, the boy disappears forever." The video cut off, leaving only static. Gloria's hands shook as she clutched the phone. The air around her seemed to vanish, replaced by a hollow ache in her chest. Ethan had trusted her, and now he was suffering because of it. Marcus found her pacing in her apartment, eyes blazing with fury. She showed him the video, and for a long moment he said nothing. Finally, his voice was low, steady, but grim. "This is exactly what I feared. They've decided to send a message. Gloria, this is no longer just about corruption. This is war." Gloria wiped her tears, her voice hardening. "Then we fight a war." But we're not letting them take Ethan. Together, they began gathering allies, journalists, cyber activists, and workers who had joined the growing movement. Every clue from Ethan's video was analyzed, the echo of machinery, the faint sound of a train horn, the shadow of a logo painted on the wall. Piece by piece, they built a trail. Gloria refused to sleep until they had a lead. Her heart carried one truth. Ethan wasn't just an intern. He was proof that courage could exist even in the smallest voices. She wouldn't let that flame be extinguished. As the movement outside grew louder, Gloria knew the hidden enemies were growing desperate. By kidnapping Ethan, they had crossed the line. "They think fear will silence me," she whispered into the night. "But all they've done is give me another reason to fight." And this time, her fight wasn't just for justice, it was for Ethan's life. The kidnapping of Ethan sent a shockwave through Gloria's movement. For weeks, workers had been whispering, protesting, and gathering in small groups. But now, with Ethan's life at stake, their whispers became roars. Across social media, across cities, one cry grew louder. "Justice for Ethan." Gloria, standing in front of the growing crowds, raised her voice like never before. "They want us afraid. They want us silent." But they made a mistake. They thought Ethan was just one boy. Ethan is all of us, and we will not let them take him. The people erupted with cheers. For the first time, Gloria felt the full weight of what she had sparked. Not just a protest, but a revolt. Meanwhile, Detective Marcus Hale and Gloria worked tirelessly to find Ethan. Using clues from the video, the faint horn of a train, the hum of machinery, they traced the kidnappers to an abandoned steel plant outside the city. Marcus laid out the plan. We'll need the crowd outside. The more noise they make, the more pressure we create. Inside, we get Ethan out alive. Gloria, this is dangerous. You don't have to come. Gloria's eyes blazed with resolve. He risked everything for me. I won't let him die in the dark. The night of the rescue arrived. Thousands of protesters gathered outside the steel plant, holding candles and signs, chanting Ethan's name. The ground trembled with their voices. News crews captured the moment live, broadcasting the revolt across the nation. Inside the plant, shadows moved. Masked men patrolled with weapons, unaware that their every step was being watched. Marcus and Gloria slipped inside through a side entrance. Guided by the faint glow of a flashlight Ethan had managed to knock over in the corner of the warehouse. His figure appeared at last, tied to a chair, battered but alive. "Ethan!" Gloria whispered as she rushed forward. His eyes widened, filling with tears. You came." Before she could respond, footsteps thundered behind them. The kidnappers had noticed. Shouts filled the air. Guns were raised. Marcus fired a warning shot, his voice echoing. "Federal agents are on their way. Surrender now or you'll be buried under the same system you serve." The kidnappers hesitated. Outside, the chants of the people grew louder, shaking the walls. "We are not invisible! Justice for Ethan!" The sound rattled the kidnappers' resolve. Their power came from fear, but now fear had shifted. It was theirs to carry. Gloria cut Ethan's ropes, pulling him to his feet. "You're safe now," she whispered, though her hands trembled. As they made their way out, one kidnapper lunged forward. Gloria turned sharply, her voice fierce and unyielding. "You will never silence us again!" The man froze, startled not by her strength, but by the sheer defiance in her eyes. And then, almost unbelievably, he lowered his weapon. The people's chants outside had broken him more than any bullet could. When Gloria, Marcus, and Ethan emerged from the steel plant, the crowd erupted in thunderous joy. Strangers embraced one another, tears streamed down faces, and candles lit up the night like stars. Ethan, weak but smiling, raised his hand in defiance. "They tried to erase us, but we are still here." Gloria took the microphone handed to her by a protester. Her voice carried across the sea of people. "This fight was never just mine. It belongs to every worker, every silenced voice, every soul who thought they were invisible. Tonight we proved we are stronger than their greed, braver than their threats, and louder than their lies." The people roared, their voices echoing across the city, carried by the wind like a promise. As dawn broke, Gloria stood with Ethan and Marcus at her side, watching the rising sun paint the sky. The empire had fallen, the boy had been saved, and the people had risen. It was not the end of the struggle, but the beginning of a new world, one built on dignity, courage, and unity, and with quiet strength, Gloria whispered the final words that would echo far beyond that morning. "We were invisible once. Never again."